Christmas, we actually are titled this message, A Tale of Two Kings. And as Christmas is right around the corner and everything that's happening, you get a lot of TV shows. You know, Charlie Brown Christmas, It's a Wonderful Life, and all of these things. And I have two favorites that I like. One is The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And I like the part in there where he takes this little ugly dog and dresses it up like a reindeer. Remember that? And then another one that I like is a movie or another show that is a real old movie. I've seen it a lot of times when we've gone to Lock Media and stuff, A Christmas Carol with Scrooge. Two of the best characters of Christmas is Scrooge and the Grinch. And in actuality, I'll show you why these characters are actually biblical characters. And you'll see some characteristics of someone out of the Bible in the Grinch and in Scrooge. And sometimes you need to understand some things. And one thing is when you go home, remember what Scrooge was famous for saying? Bah humbug. And everybody thinks that was a bad term. Go home and look up what humbug means. You'll be fascinating to understand the exact meaning of that. I'm not going to give it to you. I want you to go home and look it up and come back and say, Pastor, I never knew that. Huh? You got your phone? Go ahead, look it up. Dictionary time. I don't want you guys doing this in church. Humbug. Something intended to delude or deceive. The quality of falseness or deception. A person who is not what he claims or pretends to be. An imposter. Something devoid of sense, of meaning, nonsense. In British, it's a variety of hard mint candy. So many times when you're talking about bah humbug, you're talking about an imposter. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning, is a tale of two kings. One who pretended to be a king, and one who really was a king. And so there was a man in the Bible who actually hated Christmas more than Scrooge ever thought of hating. Even more than the Grinch. And in fact, he actually tried to kill Christmas before the Grinch was even thought of. And when you begin to look at it, it's a strange and a bizarre story right in the middle of all of these Christmas carols that we sing. Joy to the world. We wish you a Merry Christmas. But yet there was a person here in the Bible who actually tried to get rid of Christmas before we even came along and to think about these things. We think about that this season is a season, we talk about it's a season to be jolly. We sing songs like Joy to the World, Hark the Herald Angels Sings, I'll Be Home for Christmas, Jingle Bell Rock, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Y'all don't like that song? Okay, good. I won't sing that one either. But as you can look around and you can see, this is the Christmas season. We decorate some, not as much as we always do, but that's okay. It isn't all about the decorations. But it's to get you into the mood of the festivities, of the understanding that this is really supposed to be a good time of the year. And the problem is that not everybody is happy about Christmas. And in fact, this gentleman that we're going to talk about is actually really ticked off. And he's pretty angry about the whole thing, about Christmas. Only he's not a make-believe character like Scrooge in The Grinch. He's real. And he hates Christmas. And he's never even heard the word Christmas. No one ever said to him, Merry Christmas. No one ever spoke the words to him. But yet, he's the man in history that history has recorded as Herod the Great. And his story is actually told in Matthew chapter 2. And that's where we're going to go this morning. If you have your Bibles, you can follow along with us in whatever version that you have. If you don't, we will have up on the screen Matthew chapter 2, and we're going to start with verses 1 through 3 right now. Okay? And it says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived unexpectedly in Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And so what happened was that King Herod the Great, he was born into a very politically well-connected family. I don't know how much y'all follow politics, but it's absolutely fascinating that they're talking about the ticket for 2016 will be Jeb Bush against Hillary Clinton. And everybody says we've had too many Bushes and too many Clintons. Let's let somebody else have a chance. But they'll all mess it up anyway. It doesn't matter. But Herod the Great, and the reason that he was known as Herod the Great was because he was a king that played hardball. And he was well known for power brokering. At 25 years of age, he actually married the governor of, he was named the governor of Galilee, which was a high position for a young man. Generally, you did not get that position until you were in your 40s, if you lived that long. At 25, you were not to be called the governor. That was for someone else a little bit more. But the Romans wanted Herod to take control of the Jews and to just basically just keep them in line. Well, in 40 BC, the Roman Senate named him King of the Jews. He was the king at the time that Jesus was born. And he was called the King of the Jews. That was his title. This brings to light some of the story and why he's getting so upset about what's being said to him. Okay? So, if you really wanted someone who would actually look like, act like, and treat you like a villain, that was Herod. He was nasty, diabolical, and the things that he did would make Saddam Hussein, Hitler, and Mussolini look like little children. He was very vile. But he exhibited 4 classic characteristics. Number 1, he was preoccupied with power. Sound familiar? He was addicted to power. And power, if you look it up, it's actually been described as the ultimate human obsession. They say that a lot of people, for instance, brand new, straight off the cuff, newly elected representatives go to Washington and they're going to change the way that Washington behaves. They're there for 3 months and they become part of the Washington establishment, brokering deals. You vote for this and I'll vote for that so that money will come back to my constituents, into my county, into my representatives. And they love that power. They love to be able to control all of these things. But if power was an alcoholic beverage, you would have to understand that Herod would be drunk on the floor, because that's how much he loved this. And the Bible actually links it to a network of spies. And so he begins to start, he began to realize that a lot of things are going on and a lot of things are happening, and you got to give me a break for a minute because my notes are all messed up. And so anyone who had a plot to dethrone Herod, they were sniffed out. Okay? Hang on a minute. Now I got them all messed up because I got my pages out of whack. But his life and all of these things could actually be summed up in 3 words. He was capable, crafty, and he was cruel. Okay? And Herod was extremely capable in what he was asked to do, because soon after he became the king, he actually went out and he wiped out several bands of guerrillas who were terrorizing the countryside, and he used some subtle diplomacy to make peace with all of the competing factions. And this is what he was doing with his power. He was crafty. He would use his relationships and everything that he had as conduits for his power. And it was one thing that Herod could never, ever get enough of. He had a morbid distrust of everybody and anyone who might aspire to his throne. He was known as a cruel man. He held the reins of power. And here's what he did. Anyone that got in his way, he actually had them killed. Who did he have killed? Over the years, he had his brother-in-law killed. He had his mother-in-law killed. He had 2 of his sons killed, and even his wife. He wanted that power so much. And that was the cruelty of Herod as he was going through here. He was preoccupied with possessions, okay? Here's what he did. He actually built 7 palaces and 7 theaters, and one of those theaters actually held 9,500 people. He built stadiums for sporting events, and the largest stadium that he built could handle 300,000 fans. We look at stadiums today like some of the college stadiums that hold 100,000, and we look at them as big and huge. Take 3 times that, and that's what he had built. Who was building this? The Jewish people. They were his slaves. He was controlling, and he wanted this. He was preoccupied with prestige. Herod He liked to make an impression on people. He actually built entire cities that were state of the art, that nobody else had even dreamed of building. And he built these. And guess what he did? He named every one of them after one of his superiors. He didn't name them after himself. He wanted to stay in power. And what better way to stay in power than to name a big, huge architectural structure that nobody else had ever seen before. It's huge, and name it after your boss. He was the brown noser of all brown nosers. He knew how to make brownie points. And this is what he was doing. Several of his marriages kind of sound familiar. They were politically motivated or prestige-oriented. He once married the daughter of his leading rival in order to maintain his throne. Sound familiar? Talk about Solomon. Solomon did the same thing. But here's what happens with someone who is so preoccupied with power and prestige. He was preoccupied also with paranoia. Because Herod's father got poisoned by a drink. And Herod, to make sure that he would never, ever get caught that way, he went to great lengths to make sure that everything that was given to him to drink or to eat, he had tens of thousands of slaves that were his testers. And nothing ever touched his lips until one of them was found safe in eating it. Okay? He had gone through and he established an elaborate system and everything. And then all of a sudden what you have is you have these guys coming in and saying, we are looking for this king. Well, he had this network of spies, okay? And anyone who had set out to dethrone him, he had gotten word of this, okay? Because those who opposed him, he actually would invite them to a midnight swim in the Jordan River. And they always had like a cement attached to a bathrobe on. He had ruled for more than 40 years. And then all of a sudden, in the 40th year of his reign, he is now clashing with another king of the Jews. The wise men came to him and said, can you tell us, where is this one called the King of the Jews? What do you mean? I'm him. What are you talking about? Well, now if we can kind of take this sermon and give it some songs that you might know that might describe Herod. One of them would be All Shook Up. Because when you begin to look at Herod and see him right now, what I like to do is I like to fast forward for just a minute to Herod's life. Herod, and when you study the story of Jesus, you'll find another Herod. Remember it said when Herod had died, it was now safe for Joseph and Mary and Jesus to come back from Egypt. Okay? Well, when Herod was slowly dying of his disease, and all of this is history, okay? You won't find this in the Bible. His body was racked with convulsions. His breath foul. Do you remember what they say about the Grinch? Oh, Mr. Grinch, you're a foul-smelling, putrid person. No one wants to be around you because of your foul smell and in the stench. Here's Herod, the Grinch. His skin is covered with open sores, and he's rapidly losing his mind. But he's still the king. And somebody comes to him and asks him this: where is this one who has been born the King of the Jews? We saw his star, and we've come to worship him. What you'll find is that Herod got all of his scholars together and said, what do you know about this subject? What do they mean talking about this King of the Jews? Because they were looking for someone who was born the King of the Jews. And Herod's saying, hold on a minute. I'm the King of the Jews, and you're telling me you see this star of this guy? But you see, here's the difference. Herod was saying, hold on a minute. I'm the King of the Jews, but I wasn't born that way. I had to kill to gain that title. And now you're telling me that there's somebody born that's already got this title? Hold on. No one is taking my name. No one is taking my power. And he says, spies, my network, why aren't you telling me about this stuff? How did this slip through that you didn't tell me? And look at what he said in verse 3. When Herod heard this news, he was disturbed. But it didn't stop there. And all Jerusalem with him. The whole city is abuzz with this, and they're disturbed. Hold on a minute. I thought Herod was the king. You're telling me there's somebody else born right now who's the king of the Jews and has got this title? How can this be? Who elected him? Why didn't we know about this? Where's he serving? Where's his throne? Where's he at? So he's disturbed. And the word disturbed him so much that he began to convulse and he began to shake. Because he had killed all of his enemies and he's ready to die. But these strangers came with him a question. And this question says, hey, there's no time to rest now. I've got one more person to kill. And what did he do? He set out a proclamation. I want every child under the age of 2 killed. That way I'll make sure I get rid of this king of the Jews. Because he wanted this so much, okay? And Herod didn't know that the Bible had actually defined him as capable, crafty, and cruel. He had known some of the ancients, and he knew there was a prediction of the exact place of where the Messiah would come. Okay? So he calls his ministers, his religious leaders together to find out if the Bible had anything to say about this. And so now you go down into verse number 4. So he assembled all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he asked them where the Messiah would be born. And look at what they say. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. So he says, okay, what are we going to do here? He says, this is what we're going to tell you. Jesus is going to be born here in this place, okay? And so they're saying, okay, what do we do? How do I handle all of these things? Okay? And he's beginning to try to figure out, what's going on. And so as he's trying to do this, he's trying to say, how do I get rid of this guy? You see, because in history, there's always been struggles between kings, but there's never been a struggle between kings like this. So if I was to take and actually use the second movie, I would call this second part of this sudden impact. Because if you were to say that you've got two kings that just merely cross paths, that would be like too mild. Because it wasn't that way. Because if you take the law of physics and you get two objects crossing together at such a speed, going in opposite directions, colliding, that force is going to be so big and so strong that it's going to set a lot of things in motion. And it's going to upset the normal. And this is what we have. Because when these two kings clashed, Herod had a lot of power. Jesus had a lot of power. And these two forces are clashing at this moment in time. So when you begin to see this, you find that one of these, okay, he was a tyrant. Another one was a servant. You had one who was consumed with self-interest, while you have another king that is consumed with pleasing God, going in opposite directions. You had one who manipulated, slandered, and deceived, and he coerced, and yet you have another king who healed and touched and taught and loved. Polar opposites colliding in one moment. So if you actually have another movie, it would actually be entitled Herod in Us. Because Herod the Great probably was the biggest oxymoron in history. And an oxymoron is two words that don't make sense when you put the two together, like Army intelligence. That's what we always said when we were in there. But what happens with Jesus and with Herod? Herod loved to make people suffer. Jesus suffered so that we could be healed. But the problem is, if you really take a look inside of yourself this morning, maybe you will see there's a little Herod in all of us that doesn't need to be that. You see, because there's sometimes when we would rather be served than to serve. So what I like to do right now is I like for y'all to just take your temperature. If you got a pen or a piece of paper, I'm going to ask you some questions. And then after I ask you these questions, I'm going to give you some more questions. And on a scale from 1 to 10, you're going to tell me how much is your pain. Okay? Because here are some questions. Number one is, which king is ruling your life right now? Is it Herod or Jesus? Are you infected with the virus of self-promotion and craftiness this Christmas? Do you think more about yourself than others? Do you crave power and adrenaline and you rush that comes from controlling your own resources and controlling the people around you? Are you more afraid of what others may do to you instead of how you can serve them? And if so, then you've got the power of Herod may really be sitting behind the control board of your life. And here's your questions. Number one, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how important are these things to you this Christmas? Okay? How important is it to you to have control right now? Between 1 to 10. Possessions. How important are the things that you own? In a scale from 0 being not at all to 10, man, I'm really consumed with this stuff. I like my car, I like my house, I like my clothes, I like all my stuff. And if any of that thing ever happened, I don't know what I'd do with my life. Number 3, prestige. How important is status to you? When you introduce yourself to somebody, remember, it used to be, you worked for Rumpke. I'll just use that one, okay? You worked for Rumpke, you were on a truck, you were called the trash collector. When somebody met you and you got introduced to them, you would always try to think, I can't tell them that I go around picking up other people's trash. Man, that's dirty. So now, if you work for Rumpke and you go around picking up the trash and you go to meet somebody, you introduce yourself as, I'm a sanitation engineer. You're the janitor in the building, but you don't want to tell anybody that you're the janitor, which is nothing wrong with. It's a job. Somebody's got to do it. All right. Somebody does it. So instead of being a janitor, you've got to be an environmental engineer. I got to make sure that everything is just set just right. And so when you introduce yourself to someone, how do you introduce yourself? Is status important to you? And then number 4 is, how important is your protection from others? Let me give you an example. I grew up in a church in communion and foot washing. And in communion, we had 2 glasses, one for the men and one for the women. And when communion was delivered or given, you got the glass. You drank from the glass and you gave it to the person next to you. And you gave it to the next person and the next person and the next person. And then once you got to the end, if there was still any grape juice, it's grape juice, by the way, guys. If there was any grape juice or wine left in the glass, the pastor or whoever was doing communion was to drink every bit of it. There was nothing to be left because it symbolized the blood of Christ. And you can't discard it. Okay? We did that. After we had communion with that, and that, we did foot washing. Men on one side, women on the other, okay? Men did not wash women's feet. Women did not wash men's feet. But you would get down in front of your brother or your sister and you would wash their feet. I heard a very prominent, very well-respected Southern Baptist preacher over in Indiana. I'd just gone to Indiana. I'd gone to the first associational meeting over there, and they got this guy up there, and he was delivering the message. Okay? I liked the message until he came to the point where he was talking about his first pastorate. And he said, when I got to my first pastorate, they came to me and they said, oh, by the way, Pastor, we forgot to tell you, this is the Sunday we do communion. Do you want to do it? He says, no, I'm brand new. I don't know how you all do it here. So you go ahead and you do communion. I'll just sit right up here and watch and observe. So they distribute the bread and the wine. He takes part of it. They're finished. And then all of a sudden, a couple of the deacons come around behind the pulpit. They have 2 buckets. They have 2 pans. They got some towels. And he says, and I had no clue what they were doing. And they came over to me. And I'm sitting here with my shoes and my socks on, and I'm watching, and they kneel down in front of me, and I asked them, what are you doing? We're going to wash your feet. He said, there ain't nobody going to wash my stinking feet. At that moment in time, I lost all respect in that man. Because if my Lord and my Savior can get down and wash somebody's feet, don't tell me that you're better than him. Okay? So when I ask this question, how important is your protection from others? Most people, if you tell them that you're going to give communion out of a cup and everybody's going to drink out of it and wash feet, they will not show up. Number one, I am not drinking after anybody because I might get sick. I understand the paranoia, and that's what it is. Paranoia. May I say to you that in all of the years that we drank after anybody, there is nobody in that church died. Out of all the times that we washed anybody's feet, nobody got athlete's feet on their hands. And nobody broke out in all of this stuff. It's just like I was told you can't baptize people in the midst of the winter because they'll catch pneumonia. We broke ice. I can't tell you how many times we broke ice and we baptized people in a running creek or a place where we had to break the ice to lower them down in there, to go down in there, and not a one of them ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. So when we start talking about paranoia from 0 to 10, there's a lot of people hitting 8, 9, and 10 when you start talking about things in church. Okay? So here's the question. If you scored above a 7 on any of these questions, you probably got a lot more of Herod in you than you thought, and you're creating some problems for those closest to you. So let me finish. We're not in any hurry today because we got food back in the back, so you don't have to go out anywhere. And when you go out to eat, you're going to have to wait for an hour to get in. So I've got another hour. Okay, but here's my question. My question this morning, and really, in all seriousness, as I draw this to an end, my question to you is this: which king are you following? Herod or Jesus? It's one or the other. And let me say this to you. If you are not following the king, and I know the world wants to get rid of Christ, and I fell like a lot of other people, and here's what I'm saying. So many times we get caught up in Christian things that sometimes we don't check things out. Remember a few years ago, they came out with this thing. Everybody got so upset because they said Merry Christmas, right? And so they decided we can't do this. Let's take Christ out of it and let's put an X in there. And the whole Christian nation got upset. How dare you say Merry Xmas to anybody? Let me share something with you. They didn't take Christ out of anything. They thought they were taking Christ out of this. But if you go and look, the letter X in the Greek alphabet means Christ, Christos. Amen. So when they thought they were going to take Christ out of Christmas by saying Merry Xmas, they didn't take Christ out of Christmas. They may have taken the name, but they substituted the symbol. And they had no clue what they were doing. That's why they tell people now, don't you dare say Merry Christmas, Merry Xmas, you just say Happy Holidays. That's why they tell people, because remember what Jesus said, Satan may intend this for evil, but God will always bring it to good. So you can think all you want to, you're going to take Christ out of Christmas. You can't. There is no Christmas without Christ. He was the king that was born. And listen, I ain't going to argue with you over whether it was December the 25th, January the 6th, or April the 19th. I don't flat out care. I'm just saying he was born one day and he died one day. And we ought to celebrate it all the time. But Christmas is not really the most important day of the year. Easter is. Muhammad was born. Chuck was born. You were born. But Jesus died without a sin so that you and I could live. Amen. That's the difference. Now, what did Jesus say that we're supposed to do? Number one is give our life to him. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing unto God. This is your true and proper worship. Amen. That's worship. Worship is not what we do here on Sunday. We try to do that. True worship is giving your whole life, body, and soul to God. Amen. Living in Christ. That's what it is. We need to understand these things. Number two, you need to give you need to give the least of these this Christmas. And many years after Jesus was born, he taught his followers a real lesson, okay? And one of the things that he told them was this. In Matthew chapter 25 and verse number 40, he said, the king will reply, truly I tell you that whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. Amen. Jesus taught us how that it is better to give than to receive. Amen. And that when we give, sometimes we don't realize, he said, who you're giving to. So I'd like to finish this up with a letter that I'd gotten in an email a while back. And here's this, it was a story. It said this, that Ruth went to her mailbox one day and she found a letter. It had no stamp, no postmark, just her name and her address. And here's what it said. Dear Ruth, I'm going to be in your neighborhood Saturday afternoon. I'd like to stop by for a visit. Love always, Jesus. She's got this letter in her hands and her hands are shaking. I mean, if I went to the mailbox and I got this letter with no postmark, no stamp, and I open it up, it's got my name and my address, and I got this thing and it says, Dear Chuck, I'm going to be in your neighborhood Saturday afternoon and I'd like to stop by and visit with you. Love always, Jesus. Yeah, right. Okay, sure. So she's sitting there and she's holding this and she's shaking, okay? She placed the letter on her table and she said, why would the Lord want to visit me? I'm nothing special. I don't have anything to offer. And with that, Ruth remembered, I don't have anything to feed him. I have no food. But I know what? I'll run down to the store and I'll buy something for dinner. So she reached in her purse and she counted out her contents, $5.40. That's all I got. But she says, well, I can get some bread and some cold cuts at least. And so after buying a few things at the store, Ruth started walking home quickly. All of a sudden she hears, hey lady, can you help us, lady? Ruth had been so absorbed in her dinner plans that she hadn't even noticed the two figures huddled in the alleyway, a man and a woman. Both of them dressed in little more than rags. Look, lady, I ain't got a job, And my wife and I have been living out here on the street, and well, now it's getting cold and we're getting kind of hungry. And well, if you could help us, lady, we would really appreciate it. Ruth looked at both of them. They were dirty. They smelled bad. Sir, I'd like to help you, but I'm a poor man myself. All I have is some meat and some bread. And I'm having an important guest for dinner tonight, and I'm planning on serving that to him. Yeah, well, okay, lady, I understand. Thanks anyway. The man put his arm around his wife's shoulders and headed back into the alley. As she watched them leave, Ruth felt a familiar twinge in her heart. Sir, wait. The couple stopped and turned as she ran down the alley after them. Look, why don't you take this food? I'll figure out something else to serve my guest. She handed the man her grocery bag, and He said, "Thank you, lady. Thank you very much." "Yes, thank you." It was the man's wife. And Ruth could see now that she was shivering. Ruth then replied tenderly, "You know, I've got another coat at home. Here, why don't you take this one?" Ruth unbuttoned her jacket, slipped it over the woman's shoulders. Then, smiling, she turned and walked back to the street. Without her coat, without nothing to serve her guest. "Thank you, lady. Thank you very much." Ruth was chilled by the time she reached her front door and worried too. The Lord was coming to visit, and she didn't have anything to offer him. She fumbled through her purse for the door key. But as she did, she noticed another envelope in her mailbox. That's odd. The mailman doesn't usually come twice in one day. She took the letter out of the box and opened it. "Dear Ruth, it was so good to see you again. Thank you for the lovely meal. And thank you too for the beautiful coat. Love always, Jesus." Amen. The air was still cold, but even without her coat, Ruth no longer noticed. When you go back into the latter parts of Matthew, remember there was a plot in the beginning to kill Jesus? Matthew finishes right towards the end in Matthew 26. And it said, when Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away. The Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests, the elders of the people, assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they began to plot to kill him. But listen, Jesus was sitting down and having a meal with his followers. He wanted to eat with them and talk with them and converse with them because he knew this was the last time they were going to be together. In the meal that they were eating was not a big meal. They didn't have a lot of Thanksgiving turkey or Christmas ham. It was kind of small, but prepared for just that moment. But what I want you to think about is this. When you sit down at Christmas and you look at all of the food and you thank God for what you have, please remember there are others that are sitting at the tables trying to figure out what are they going to eat. Amen. Because they don't have anything. They don't have the big turkeys or the big hams. And maybe your life is like a big buffet line right now. And it looks good while you're going through. And you're just picking up one thing after another, just putting it on your plate. And you remember that when you grew up that you were told to always eat everything on your plate, never throw anything away, because there's children in Ethiopia dying. You know, was what I always got fed, or the story I was told. And when I was told that, I was a smart aleck too, and I said, well, they could have the broccoli, I don't like it. They could gladly have that, just leave my bologna sandwich, I'm okay. But when you get through life, when you think it's an all-you-can-eat buffet and you get to the end, and you find out everything that you've been tasting just doesn't taste good. Maybe instead of feeling satisfied, you feel bloated. Let me say this to you. If your life right now is that buffet and you're stuffed, you can't enjoy eating with Jesus. It can't be stuffed and bloated with the things of this world. I was going to share a story with you in finishing, and I can do that. This year, we generally, as a church, we do Operation Christmas Child. And this year we didn't do that. And I was kind of concerned, okay, so what are we going to do? And I got names of people. I asked, some people called, and at Christmas time we always get hit with so many things, electricity, utilities, and I wish I could pay everybody's utilities. I wish I could keep everybody warm and safe, but we can't. And yet there were some people that said, got some kids, and can you just kind of help them out? Yeah, I think so. And we gave names out, and thank you guys so much for taking the names and doing that, the money, and everything that you've done. I'd come almost every day. I come here from lunch, and I come here to the church because I just want to get away. I'll come here and I'll see if there's any phone calls, and I got a phone call, and it said, "Listen, we don't have anything for Christmas. We've got gifts and stuff, but we really don't have anything to eat. Can you help me out?" I thought, I don't even know you. Who are you? I call and they tell me who they are. I struggled. And I said, okay, yeah, here's what I can give you, and I'll do that. And some people would say, why did you do that? I don't know. Don't know why I did it. I just know that I needed to do that. I said, listen, I can't do it today. I've got all these other things to do. I'll pick the stuff up. I'll get everything ready, and I'll bring you a gift certificate. You can go buy what you need for Christmas and that. And Thursday night, I went and I dropped it off. I was standing there, and there's a young man lying on the couch. And he introduced himself to me, and I shook hands with him and just shared some small talk. His stepbrother comes in, and he says, thank you so much for this. You really don't know how much this helps us right now. I've lost my job and don't know what I was going to do. And he says, can we pray? And I said, yeah, sure. Why don't you go ahead and lead us? And most people say, no, you're the pastor, you pray. And I just didn't feel like praying. I just felt like you should pray. And he did. At the end of the prayer, the young man that was on there, he left, I left, and the young man was sharing with him later on that evening before he went to bed. I thank you so much for the words that you said, because it just made me feel at peace and at ease. Friday morning, I'm driving to work at 7:30. I get a call from the young man, the stepbrother. And he says, Chuck, he says, Pastor Chuck, remember the young man that was laying on the couch that you shook hands with? He just got killed on Roosevelt going to work. That was the 17-year-old boy. God does things, and sometimes he causes us to do things that you don't know why. The family was supposed to be here today, but they're hurting. They're hurting bad. I've been conversing with them the last couple of days because they've asked me to do the funeral, and I'm saying, I don't know how to do this, guys. And I asked the question, I said, you got to tell me, do you know if he was a Christian? And the stepbrother came back and said, yes. He had given his life to Christ. And that family is looking for a church. And God has allowed us people to step out and help. And when you do this to the least of these, you do this unto me. I may have been the one that was there that night. I may have been the one that gave them the gift certificate. I may have been the one that shared, but you all had a part in this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what this church does, and this is what this church will continue to do. Amen. Is to help those who can't help themselves. Will some take advantage of us sometimes? Yes, they will. I'm not worried about it. I am worried about, God, what do you want me to do? And that is this. Share Jesus and share the love. Amen. I was telling people, I have no clue what God's doing right now. I don't know. But I know he's doing something big. There's just too much going on, and there's just too much happening right now that I wish I could share all of it with you. I can't, because I don't know it all. I'm just amazed every day when I get up how God is just bringing things in my path. Hello, my name is Chuck Kahn. I'm the pastor here at Calvary Baptist Church. We would like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to view this message. We'd also like to invite you to our church here, located at 1601 Jackson Lane in Middletown, Ohio. We're a Southern Baptist church with a big heart, and we love everyone that walks in the door. You will find that people here friendly, enjoyable, and full of life. So at any time, if you need to get a hold of us, you can contact us at the church here at area code 513-423-7251. Our time of services are Sunday morning. We have Sunday school or life groups at 9:30, followed by worship service at 10:45. Our Awana program, consisting of Puggles all the way through Trek, it runs on Sunday evening at 6 p.m., as well as a worship service that will be going on for the parents and others at that time. Then on Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, small group, which will be at 7 p.m. And then we also have small groups during the week. Anytime you'd like information, again, just give us a call, 513-423-7251.